Today, we're going to crack open a really old text, but not as some dusty piece of history. Think of it more like a user's manual for the human mind, one that's surprisingly modern. We're diving into the Sabbāsava Sutta. It's basically a 2,500-year-old psychological system for finding and then fixing the root causes of our own mental stress. All right, let's get into it.
So, here's our roadmap for today. First, we're going to diagnose the core problem, what this text calls the mind's inner toxins. Then we'll look at the one single mechanism that changes everything, the attention switch. From there, we'll explore the first big solution, which is a technique called abandoning by seeing. After that, we unpack a whole toolkit of 6 other mental disciplines. And finally, we'll see the incredible outcome this whole system points toward.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. Before you can fix a problem, you have to know exactly what it is. This first part is all about shining a light on that fundamental issue that the rest of this toolkit is built to solve.
Just think about it for a second. Have you ever wondered where those feelings of anxiety or that nagging sense of craving or just that background hum of confusion, where does it all come from? It can feel like it just bubbles up out of nowhere, right? Like these little leaks in your mind, messing up your day. Well, this ancient text actually gives these leaks a name and a very specific cause.
That name, in the original Pali language, is asava. And the metaphor here is so important. It doesn't just mean a problem. The word is related to fermentation, like how a drink can become an intoxicant. The idea is that these are these deep, deep mental patterns, things like sensual desire, or just clinging to being alive, or basic ignorance, that have been festering for a long time, and they ooze out, intoxicating our minds from the inside. So if these asavas are the problem, then what's causing them? Here's where the text makes a pretty radical claim. It says the problem isn't that these toxins exist in the first place. No, the real problem is the way our mind pays attention to things. That's it. That's the core diagnosis.
And this brings us to what is, honestly, the most crucial idea in the whole system. There are 2 ways to pay attention. On one side, you have yoniso manasikara, which we can call superficial attention. This is off-the-mark thinking. It's when your mind just reacts to surface-level stuff, gets distracted, and actually ends up feeding the toxins, making them even stronger. But on the other side, you have yoniso manasikara, radical attention. Yoni means womb or origin. This is attention that goes right to the source, to the root cause of a problem. And by doing that, it starves the toxins. It cuts off their food supply. So this is way more than just a change of focus. It's a total change in strategy.
This quote just nails the difference perfectly. See, superficial attention gets you lost in these big, abstract, navel-gazing questions like, who am I? What was I in the past? What will I become? It's a total rabbit hole. Radical attention just cuts through all of that noise. It asks a simple, direct, incredibly practical question. Okay, I'm feeling pain. Where exactly is this coming from? One path leads to more confusion, the other leads straight to clarity. So let's look at the first method, which really shows how this radical attention works in the real world. The very first tool in the whole toolkit is called dasana, and it flows directly from applying this new way of paying attention. The whole idea is that simply seeing the problem clearly is the first massive step to getting rid of it.
So when we're running on that superficial attention, we get caught in this totally predictable chain reaction. It starts with those unfit, self-obsessed thoughts. That leads us to develop these rigid, dogmatic beliefs. I absolutely have a permanent self. Or the opposite, I absolutely don't have a self. Either way, you're trapped. The text calls this getting tangled in a thicket of views. And the result? It's simple. You stay stuck and you keep suffering.
But now, look what happens when you flip the switch to radical attention. You start with the raw data of your actual experience. Okay, this feeling right here, this is suffering. That's a fit thought. It immediately leads you to investigate. What's the origin of this? And the result is amazing. The very beliefs that used to trap you, especially that fixed idea about a personal identity, you see them for what they are and they just get abandoned. This is freedom that comes from nothing more than clear seeing. Now, seeing clearly is the foundation. It's absolutely crucial. But it's not the whole story. The text then gives us 6 more super practical, targeted strategies for our day-to-day lives. This is where the whole thing goes from being a cool theory to a full-on cognitive toolkit for building a genuinely resilient mind. We've already looked at the foundational one, abandoning by seeing. So now let's dive into the other 6 tools that make this system so complete. This is where it gets really hands-on.
All right, tool number 2 is samavara, or restraining. The best modern equivalent is probably proactive impulse control. It's all about guarding the gates of your senses, your eyes, your ears, your mind. The idea is that if you leave the doors wide open, destructive and feverish things are going to get in. It's like being the bouncer at the nightclub of your own mind. You get to decide who gets in and who stays out. Next up, we have Patisevana, which is all about using things mindfully. This isn't about becoming an ascetic or depriving yourself of everything. It's much smarter than that. It's about using things like food, clothes, and shelter for their actual purpose. To support your body, rather than just for a quick hit of pleasure or to show off. You're shifting your whole relationship with stuff from one based on craving to one based on function. Tool number 4 is adivasana, or enduring, and this is pure resilience training. Let's be real, some things in life are just unavoidable. It gets cold, it gets hot, people say mean things. The practice here isn't to pretend it doesn't bother you. It's to bear it patiently without piling on that second layer of mental drama, the complaining, the why me story. It's building the mental muscle to handle what you simply cannot change. Number 5 is parivajana, or avoiding. And this is just good old-fashioned practical wisdom. You could call it threat mitigation. It's about consciously choosing to steer clear of obvious dangers. That could be a wild animal, an unsafe part of town, or just people you know are bad news. You don't have to endure everything. It's wise to just avoid unnecessary trouble in the first place. Okay, now this next one is a powerhouse. It's called vinodana, or removing. This is a very active, very assertive strategy. The text is crystal clear. When a thought rooted in greed or hatred or cruelty pops into your head, you absolutely do not tolerate it. You don't just sit and watch it, you abandon it, you dispel it, and, I love this language, you annihilate it. This is like thought stopping or cognitive reframing at its most decisive. Nope, you're not welcome here. Get out. And finally, the 7th tool is bhavana, or developing. This is the flip side of removing. See, you can't just keep pulling weeds out of a garden. Eventually, you have to plant some flowers. You can't just create a vacuum by getting rid of the bad stuff. You have to fill that space with something better. And that's what this is, systematically and deliberately cultivating positive qualities, like mindfulness, energy, calm, and balance. So what happens when you actually use this 7-part toolkit? You do all this work. This seeing, restraining, enduring, developing. What's the payoff? What's the ultimate goal here? Well, the text paints a picture of a profound kind of psychological well-being. And this is it. This is the result. By putting these tools into practice, a person becomes someone who dwells restrained. They've plugged the leaks. They've cut the very root of craving, untied those knots of rigid beliefs. And by finally understanding the mechanics of their own mind, they make a final end to that deep, pervasive dissatisfaction we all know as suffering. So there you have it, a complete psychological system from 2,500 years ago that honestly feels less like a religion and more like an advanced form of cognitive behavioral therapy. It gives us a diagnosis of the problem, it points to the root cause, and then it hands us 7 specific, actionable tools to fix it. So the only question left, really, is which of these ancient tools for mastering the mind speaks to you the most right now? Which one are you going to use first?